Hi, my name is Kelly Maniaitis and I'm an Organisational Psychologist here in Brisbane, Australia. And what I thought I would do is do a training video for you. This is based on my ebook about tackling infobesity. It's all about how leaders can think clearly. So the part that I wanted to concentrate, that's really an important part in the ebook, is this topic here, what I want to train about, which is what busyness does to our brain. So I will walk you through a couple of the concepts, which is what is busyness, and then what is it that happens in our brain. So we'll go through some of the neuroscience behind busyness. So hopefully you'll enjoy the training that we'll do in the next, will probably take about 10-15 minutes. So first place is this concept of busyness. I don't know if you're the same as me. When I walk into workplaces, when I ask people how are they going, invariably I get people saying they are busy. I've got a lot to do. And when we look at busyness, what does that actually mean? And that's the first thing that I ask is, so what do you mean you're busy? So a couple of things that people find they're busy doing is, going to lots of meetings. So you do see in workplaces, people going to back-to-back meetings, being late from a previous meeting. You just see a lot of hyperactivity of all these meetings in workplaces. In fact, often in workplaces, meeting rooms are prized possessions. It's really even hard to lock in a meeting room. I don't know if you feel the same. Also, busyness is tackling your inbox. So being inundated with emails, meeting requests, replying to emails. So people are busy and getting bogged down in just dealing with inbox that's a 24/7 cycle. Busyness can be, the papers, the information that you're reading. So paper, advice that you're getting, trying to read through memos. So often when I hear the word busyness and drill down what does that actually look like, it's a whole host of these things that are happening. It seems like we're not actually doing a lot, we're just being busy in our workplaces. And when you boil that down, I kind of mentioned it before, when we see busyness, I sort of see that as information. Lots and lots of information coming at us from all directions, from all time frames. It just seems that busyness today is all about, how much information is coming. And that gives you a clue with the ebook that I just spoke about when I talk about this concept of infobesity. So what I mean by infobesity is that we are so overloaded with information that we're almost being, fat with it. So we're weighed down with so much information that an outcome is that we become really busy. And I don't know if you feel this, but after a day of meetings, dealing with inboxes, getting advice, dealing with any papers or memos or anything that's coming at you, that you walk out of that day, even though you were filled with doing lots of busy things, that you feel like you haven't achieved anything. That all of this information, that you're still being weighed down by all of this busyness. Now the thing is, busyness, this state of busyness and having lots of information has a big impact on our brain. So that's that second part I want to talk about is let's look at what the impact is for you in terms of your brain, what's happening with all this information. So what I'll do is I'll draw a cartoon kind of version of a brain. So here's a bit of a brain. So side view of a brain. So you've got the front part, this part here. You've got down here the back. So this kind of piece here is depicting your brainstem, so it kind of links down to your spine. So it's a side view of the brain. So I'm going to just talk through a couple of the key elements because the brain, we're still exploring all the different locations and parts of the brain. I only want to talk about a few key parts that are linked to this topic of busyness that I think is really important and gives you a clue as to why workplaces are getting so dragged down by information. So the first part I want to talk about is this front part of the brain. So this part of the brain being the prefrontal cortex. So that prefrontal cortex is the executive function of your brain. It's quite an important part of the brain because it does a key things that really helps you in your leadership as well as just workplaces generally, human beings generally. So the functions that it's responsible for generally is your working memory. So working memory is your ability to hold on to information just enough to carry a conversation. It's not necessarily short-term or long-term memory. It's, for example, you're remembering what I said at the beginning of the sentence, what I'm saying now, so it actually makes sense of that. Hopefully your executive function, your prefrontal cortex firing off at the moment because you're trying to get your working memory. The other parts of the brain or the prefrontal cortex, what it's responsible for is some problem solving. It's also responsible for the way that you make decisions. So you can sort of see it's quite a rational part of the brain. It's quite an evolved part of the brain. It's linked to real cognitive functions around language, skills and things like that. And so what's I guess really important when you look at that prefrontal cortex functioning, being working memory, problem solving, decision making, I think what's really important to recognise is for this to work well, what the prefrontal cortex is all about is focus. It's really about being able to capture information, use that information. So you need an element of focus because basically what's driving that prefrontal cortex is it's goal orientated. That's what makes humans, I guess, unique in a sense that it's able to hold on to a goal and work onto that goal so it can make memories, it can problem solve, it can decision make. What's really interesting in workplaces is sometimes we don't see this focus actually happening, and it's because there's another part of the brain that kind of works against us. So what happens is the brain is driven by seeking novel stimuli. It actually enjoys finding new things. And what happens is, in order, the brain, it's almost like it needs a bit of a relief from all this hard work of focus and goals and things like that. It kind of wants to distract itself. So it actually tries really hard, actually, or actually quite easily, to distract you. And it's really interesting in workplaces. We're filled with lots of distractions, lots of new information, meetings, inboxes, papers, advice, emails. This stuff here is actually something that the brain is seeking. So it wants a bit of relief from this quite heavy cognitive functioning of problem solving and decision making. So what we do as leaders, just human beings, is we actually want to be distracted by novel stimuli. And the workplace, as you can see, is filled with lots of distractions. So we want to go, surprisingly, to back-to-back meetings and look at our inbox and read a paper and switch to different tasks over and over and over again. But the problem is, goes back to this, there's too much information. And our problem is, I guess the brain doesn't know how to switch off and turn it off. So we want to be distracted. We can be distracted quite easily in the workplace. And then we lead into this situation of information overload. So what happens when you're overloaded? A couple of things that can really happen, and I wonder if it's happening, whether it happens to you. Sorry. So I do wonder whether it happens to you in terms of this overload. So when you become overloaded, it almost creates what I call a stress response. Okay? Overload's not a great place to be. You know that you're in this overload if you're sort of stuck in overwhelm. You know, that's what happens when you've got lots of information coming at you. So when you're in overload, it's triggering a stress response, which, if we go back to the brain, is triggered in the brain. So there's a part of the brain right in the middle part, primitive part of the brain, which is this trigger of stress response. Some of you may already have heard of these parts of the brain. One's called the amygdala, another part is the thalamus. So that part of the brain gets triggered when the brain feels like it's starting to be stressed. It feels like there's too much happening which impacts in the brain's mind in terms of survival. So we're stuck in overload, stuck in overwhelm. We actually feel like this is quite a negative space to be in, which then creates a stress response, which often you hear people talk about fight or flight response. You know, I've got to get out of this situation. I don't want to feel stuck and overwhelmed, so I'm going to be fighting or flighting this. What does this mean in the workplace for you as a leader? This is where, when I see overload in leaders, I see leaders becoming defensive. So they use or employ defensive strategies. And the unfortunate thing is it's an unconscious thing. Unfortunately, it's something that just happens automatically because these parts of the brain, the amygdala and the thalamus, it just gets triggered instantaneously. Once we feel like we're stuck or have that perception of stuck and overwhelmed, we will absolutely trigger the stress response without even knowing, and we see leaders becoming defensive. So what does leadership mean when we become defensive? We have fragmented thinking. We're not holding thoughts very well. We have what's called adrenalized decision making, knee-jerk decision making, not well thought out of, too quick. We see a lack of focus. We also see like tunnel vision. So leaders not being able to see around the peripheral, we just see what's in front of us. And this is not a great place to sort of be, because when a leader is in this frame, and I wonder if you've ever been like in this frame, chances are it's an accidental thing, because we can see workplaces that are kind of leading us and leading leadership into a defensive space where we do things that ordinarily we wouldn't normally do. We might make a decision, make a response that's not quite what you would ordinarily have thought of, or you have tunnel vision where you make a decision based on what's in front of you, and then afterwards you realise I didn't consider all parts, because the brain is getting tunnel vision because of that stress response. What's interesting about when a leader's in this defensive mode is that when your brain is in that mode, it kind of is contagious. What that means is that when your brain's triggering a stress response, it can actually trigger other brains to be feeling the exact same thing. And that's what I want you to think. Is if I'm in a situation where I'm overloaded with information, and that's because the workplace is like that, which means I'm going to have this kind of distracted, defensive kind of leadership style, I'm going to be triggering that in my people. And your people will display some of these things. So I guess that gives you a clue as to if your brain is in this infobesity stage of overload. You will find that your team members have fragmented thinking, that they're making decisions that are based on reactions, adrenalized. They lack focus. They don't know what their priorities are, even though you've told them a number of times. They have tunnel vision. They can't see past, today or tomorrow, or they're not able to collaborate effectively because they're so siloed in their thinking. This tunnel vision allows you to be siloed, that they're not connecting with other people. If you're feeling that your team's like that, unfortunately, chances are you're feeling like that. And we need to put in place strategies that actually gets us back to focus. How we can prevent distractions from happening, because if we can understand what we need to focus on and understand what distracts us that aren't important, meetings that we should be attending, inbox replies that you really shouldn't be worrying about straight away, or information that's not important, then we are starting to manage this cycle a lot better rather than getting the overload. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the training on what busyness does to your brain. I hope it gave you some aha moments, some ideas about whether your brain is in overload or perhaps your team. So I encourage you to download the ebook on tackling infobesity, how leaders can think clearly again, where I'll walk you through more of this kind of content where you get a real thorough understanding of how to get focused and not be so overloaded. Enjoy!